Well, hello there, everyone. It's Kristi. Welcome back to the channel. If you've been watching my channel or watching the circle of friends that I hang around with here on YouTube, you'll know that this is my... But I'm still going. But Bethany's not here. That was weird. So I see I've got two viewers. Hi, two viewers. Let me just explain what happened. Oh, she popped in and then she dropped out again. Oh, this is annoying. Right. Well, let me riff a little bit for the people who are watching. What happened was I was doing my intro and I looked over at my screen and suddenly there was an error message and it said, try again in a few moments, which is something I've never seen. And then it started the Hangout again. I could see that there were viewers watching. I felt a moment of embarrassment and then realized I was in a live program. So the only problem now is, hold on one second. Okay, so I'm sorry, I just got a message from Bethany on Facebook saying that she had received a notification that I'd left the Hangout. Like, I just sort of suddenly up and left my own Hangout, which I understand must have been really confusing for her. So right when I jumped back into the Hangout, she wasn't there. And hello, welcome back.
Hey, I don't know what happened. It just gave me a notification that you were gone.
It was very strange. There was a technical problem, I think, on my end, and it kicked me out, but then it kicked me right back in. But it kicked you out when it kicked me back in, and then I saw you tried to pop up once, but it wouldn't let you back in. It was all very strange. It was basically, this has been the worst opening I've ever had to deal with in my 3+ whatever years of being on YouTube. But that's okay. I'm glad you were here to enjoy that with me.
Either that or I caused it somehow.
I doubt that. I am far more certain that the fault would lie somewhere along the lines of YouTube rather than yourself. So, so moving on. Yeah, we are here in a hangout on a lovely Sunday afternoon. There might be intoxicants in the room. There might be intoxicants in us. But as the case may be, we're here for a chat about, we're going to talk about the Day of Freedom, actually, or Day for Freedom, I should say. But before we get into that topic, I'd like to introduce you guys to Bethany Futrell. And we're going to talk a little bit about you, Bethany. You are currently the host of one show and a co-host in another. You want to talk a little bit about those two programs first so people know a bit about what you're doing?
I would be delighted. I am the host of Talks Atheism, which is a relatively new podcast. About to record episode 5 with you. And it's all about sort of current events with an atheist spin and try to throw in some historical context or social context, or you just make information a little bit more understandable for my listeners. I'm also the co-host of the Inciting Incident podcast with Riss McCool. And Marissa and I basically interview really, really cool people every single week and post that to all of the podcatchers that are available out there. We are really proud of the fact that we very rarely interview cis-het white men. For the most part, we're talking to people of color, we're talking to women, we're talking to trans people, because frankly, cis-het white men get a little bit too much of a platform. So we want to talk to people who have other perspectives and other histories. Additionally, we have an upcoming live show in Chicago, June 23rd for Inciting Incident. So if anybody is in Chicago around that time, I think there are still tickets available. It's a small venue. So if you're around the area, I recommend just go to our show page and check it out.
Excellent. I'm so glad that you guys are doing that. That's fantastic to be moving to a live show format. That's really exciting. So
we're pretty pumped. We did a live show, oh God, I guess it was July 15th of last year, and just really loved it and loved getting the chance to bring a lot of interesting people on stage and put them in front of listeners who don't normally interact with those kinds of people in person. So it was a lot of fun. We're doing it again this year.
You mentioned about going on tangents, I think, when we were getting ready to go on air. And I have one that I'd like to introduce, because you were saying, while you were describing your the effort you make to the kinds of people you recruit, right? You're making an effort to recruit people who traditionally don't get platformed. And I see this too when we do voting behavior and we're looking at polling and we're reporting different demographics. We'll use the phrase people of color, and then we'll put women in a different category. And I always wonder, where are women of color in that? When we say people of color and then we say women, are we taking all of the women from the people of color who are women and also counting them as women? Or when we say women, do we mean white women? Or do some people say white women? And that's it seems like it's a gap there. Like, maybe we should say men and women of color instead of people of color, because I think that it tends, I at least tend to read women as white women, and maybe that's my bias or error or whatever. But it's a linguistic thing in polling that I've noticed.
I agree with you when it comes to polling. For me, for what I just said, I was foreshortening the whole list. I would have also said things like, we bring on non-binary people, we bring on women of color, we bring on men of color, we bring on trans people of all, persuasions. And I think for me, it was just a foreshortening of the list.
No, I understood what you meant, definitely. Yeah,
but I think you're
comprehensively.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right. I think we tend to either lump women of color into people of color, or women of color into just women. And I'm a white girl, and
Mm-hmm.
I am not a woman of color. So my experience is vastly different, especially considering a lot of the women of color that we've interviewed, so different from what they experience on a daily basis, that should be a completely separate group.
Well, of course we agree, because we're both right. So echo chamber.
And for that one, Prost.
Yes, there you go, Prost. Yeah. Right. Anything else that you wanted to mention before? Oh, yeah, we were going to talk a little bit. That's right, the interview part of it. So I wanted to ask you a bit about sort of your background and the path that has, when you look back at the path to where you are now during these podcasts, how did you get there? What are the high points in that story?
Oh, wow. Well, I was born in Tennessee, moved to Kentucky when I was 10 years old. And so I say I grew up in Kentucky for the most part. My family is very, very fundamentalist Christian. My mother is a young earth creationist. Wow. What are the high points? I'm going to start with the low points, I think, because that really takes us to the mountaintop. I was extraordinarily religious when I was growing up. I was very religious. I was evangelical. I thought that Jesus was my BFF. And it was just the person that I had to be, and the way that I was indoctrinated for my entire life. Until, of course, you know the story. You move away to college, you meet new people, you get to learn that there are different perspectives than yours. At that point, I came to the realization that no, in fact, my interest in other women was not, Jesus testing me. It was, in fact, just a normative part of my life. So I was able to accept that about myself. I came to an understanding that, a lot of the things that I had been taught didn't make a lot of sense, and moved toward more of a secular humanist philosophy, even if I was still retaining that belief in a deity. And then I almost died. I had a terrible kidney disease called xanthogranulomatous pyelonephritis. The long and the short of that is the sick and dying have a lot of time to think. And I was laid up in a bed for a very long period of time, watched a shit ton of debates. Oh, I'm sorry. Am I allowed to curse?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Yes. Watched massive quantities of debates, realized that, the people who were on my side, the religious side of the debate, were always using the same arguments, whereas the people on the other side were coming up with interesting perspectives and ways to counter it. And it was always well countered by the other side. So I looked into it further, admitted I was an atheist, and at that point ended up moving to Chicago, which is where I am now. And went from being a moderately skeptical, relatively humanist, very religious girl to the most progressive human you might ever meet. And so that pushed me toward activism. I realized there were a lot of people who grow up just like I grew up, knowing only one thing, and I wanted to get voices out there, not just my own, but other voices, to counter just the crap that you're taught from, infancy. Think about things, ask good questions, learn how to be reasonable and skeptical and think things through before you make decisions about what you believe in about the world. That started with podcasts and moved into the Chicago Atheist Society, of which I'm a founding member. And just it became kind of my life is trying to get people to see reason. It doesn't work, just for the record. It does not work.
But the effort is still worth it, because sometimes you plant seeds and they bloom much later, and sometimes people come back and tell you the flowers that have come up that they've tended since you've planted those seeds.
When I got the chance to meet Matt Dillahunty in person for the first time, I shook his hand and I said, "Sir, I think you're amazing. I love watching you on the Atheist Experience. When I was very ill, you were, a voice that I wanted to hear, but also you were the one who wore me down. And I want to thank you for putting that, initial idea of skepticism in my head." He says that he gets that all the time, that people come up to him at all kinds of events and say, "Man, you were the one who wore me down."
But there's another side to that, which is you kept going back.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
It was intentional on my part, for sure.
Yeah. No, but I mean, he is he is putting out the information that people who have an itch that needs to be scratched, they just can't let good enough lie, go back to and kind of pick over and pick at and wrestle with again and again. And this, one of the first videos I put out on YouTube, not one of the first, but within the first year, was based on, I'd watched about 200 deconversion stories, and out of them picked out, two main paths: people who grew up without religion, and people who grew up inside religion, because they have very different experiences. But within people who grew up inside religion, some people seem to resist it very easily, and some people, like you and me, like buy into it, and we are believers, and then we come out of it later. But it's interesting to kind of hear some of the points that you mentioned, because one of them is that a lot of people mentioned was either going to university or going into the military, because it breaks that habit of going to church, and also you're breaking away from the community where everyone has the norms. And then you start meeting people who have very different ideas, because it's outside of your social circle, and how different people react to that can keep them on the path that will be part of their path to atheism. And also that going back, that's also that itch that needs to be scratched, rather knowing the truth than believing blindly. And that was also part of your story. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I want to add one little thing. You mentioned, moving away and getting out of the situation or family or what have you, and the, how do I state this coherently? Going into the military, moving away for college, moving away for a job, whatever it is that gets you out of that pattern. That for sure is the case for most people. For 2 years when I was in college, I was in a Christian rock band. So I would say, initially it didn't do that for me. Initially, it was just broadening my horizons and putting me in a position where I could admit to myself my sexual orientation. And then from there, I was able to look at the world differently. But yeah, oh yeah, I was in a Christian rock band for 2 years. Don't tell anyone.
And were they upset when you eventually had to quit the band, or did the band break up?
It was more of like a slow fizzle. It was one of those things where we were all taking classes, and initially everything was fine because the classes were easy and everybody was going to the same church. And then I got really uncomfortable with that church because of the shit that they talked about women, and ended up not going back as much. And the other guys just didn't, they ended up not having enough time to practice because they had so many classes and exams and so forth. So it was just really a slow fizzle.
Oh, good. So no big blowout at the end, just a quiet snuffed out.
Yeah. I don't usually have many big blowouts in my life, although there have been a handful. I'm not that kind of person. I'm not really into drama and like attacking people and, shouting at people, which is really funny because my co-host on Inciting Incident, Marissa, would tell you that I am the person on the show who can't leave a sleeping dog to lie. I am the person who's like, oh, you said a thing and I don't think you can back it up. Why don't you back it up for us right here, right now? I'm calling you out. So I'm kind of a little bit of an enigma in that realm. I don't like to fight, but at the same time, I won't let you get away with saying something that's clearly erroneous.
You're tenacious. You're tenacious bee.
Oh my God, why is that not my Twitter handle?
It is now. There you go.
It's gonna have to be.
Giving you that one for free.
Tenacious bee. I love it.
So, should we talk about the Day for Freedom?
Oh my God, yes. Have you watched any of the footage? I know I'd asked you beforehand.
Right. So I haven't seen the footage, but before we came on air, I did go through the Twitter feed for the hashtag, and there were, it looked like there was, I would say, like a few thousand people. It was no women's march. It was not even as big as the march I went on against the conservative liberal coalition in 2010. But they did have, a robust turnout in that way. And a lot of the tweets were coming from RT, the Russian television station out of the UK. So that was interesting. But you've seen more of it, so why don't I kick it over to you?
Well, I don't know that I've seen more of it. I've seen footage of it. And the funniest part, you were talking about size-wise, it was no women's march. It looked a little bit like, again, I'm from Kentucky. It looked somewhat like an outdoor concert for a local metal band. So there were people and there was a stage, and they're outside. It's a beautiful day, but it definitely didn't look like an actual protest. It looked like a relatively small gathering of human beings who are there to listen to metal music from a band that very few people know about. A lot of the things that they're saying are, if you don't think about it for more than 10 seconds, make absolute sense. Like, oh, don't silence me. The government shouldn't tell me what to think or say. Like that, starting at that point, sure, okay. The government can't tell you what to think. At the same time, does anybody deserve a platform, though? Like that's the argument, isn't it? That they're being deplatformed and that's therefore silencing them.
Well, I guess, depends on who's speaking. So Lauren Southern was barred from the country because, she was considered likely to incite problems with the public order, which given that
she was likely.
Yeah, precisely. So it's
problems, wasn't she?
So they had justification, they had cause for that position, considering she'd fired flares at boats in the past. And Milo Yiannopoulos, to my knowledge, he has never come forward with the names of people he said were at parties where there was sex with boys who looked very young that he attended. And he's never come forward with the people he says he knew from those parties. And of course, he also was famously dropped by his publisher and Breitbart for his comments on having sex with boys under the age of 15, minors, yes. And yet he is, another one of the people who they're putting up on stage. And I know I have had lots of debates in the last 10 days or so with fans of Count Dankula, the guy who put up the pug and had said the phrase about gassing people who were Jewish 23 times in a video of only a few minutes, with explicit Nazi imagery and references to Hitler. And he said it was meant to be very offensive, that he made it as offensive as possible. And then he cried because he said it was just a joke, man. And because it was just a joke, it actually wasn't all these horrible things that he said. If it wasn't a joke, then it would be those things. But because I said it was funny, I don't want to be held accountable for saying those things. I just want to be able to say them and get away with it.
Isn't that sort of what Carl Benjamin did and said regarding his tweet that went through, trickled through the crowd and made them all laugh at SmithCon last year?
Well, I mean, Carl,
he basically said, I'm allowed to tweet this thing and it's a joke and all of my followers know it's a joke, so it's funny.
He's changed the rationale for that tweet several times.
Oh,
so he wanted to prove that if he said he wouldn't rape somebody, that they would still criticize him. Other times he says he does it because she laughed in a committee for reasons that he misrepresents. But in this case, the video in question was seen by 3 million people, or at least it was viewed 3 million times before it was taken down. And his defense was it was a private joke between him and his girlfriend, but he put it up on his YouTube channel. She's not even a subscriber to the channel. He didn't tell her it was on the channel, and he left the country right after posting it. So she didn't even know about it for a few days until after it had already started to catch on. So he admitted he was trying to be very offensive, and he gave a BS story to try to get out of it in terms of it was a private communication, not a social media communication, which it clearly was. And he was found guilty. And that's not his free speech rights being taken away. Oh, no, did Bethany leave again? Oh, no, I think she got kicked out. Well, I'll just continue my thought then. That's not about... let me just send her a message. His ability to say something within the law has not been taken away. You can be offensive. You're back. Hey.
Yes, I'm back.
Thank you.
I wanted to go a little bit meta with this, just a tiny bit meta, because having read the articles surrounding this Day for Freedom nonsense and a lot of the people who were either going to be there or were promoting it, I heard some names that I had never heard before, one of whom was Gavin McInnes. And I did a little bit of research, just, listening to the things that they say and getting kind of an understanding of these people. And having all in the span of a handful of days, having had to listen to all of these people and all of the hate that they spew and the crap that they throw out, meta speaking, just from like a higher level, like overlooking everything, a lot of these people are just not good at what they do. Like Carl Benjamin, Sargon of Akkad, he's very rambly, right? Like he yammers about things and then posts it with his, whatever it is, his avatar thing. Additionally, if you ever watch an episode or a video of the Gavin McInnes show, he's very attention deficit. Like he'll start yammering something racist, something else, and all the blacks and all the Mexicans and all the whatnot. And then he'll go off on like I'm not even kidding, like a 3 to 5 minute tangent that has absolutely nothing to do with what he's saying or what he's doing. And then his like producers that you can see in the back room pull him back in and put up a video of whatever it was that he was about to talk about. And it's just, these people are just not very good at what they're doing. And the only thing that makes sense to me as to being all is that humans have a natural desire to hate or despise the other, right? The out group. And so that's the only reason these people are famous. Milo is a glorified troll. And he's not even very good at it. It doesn't make a ton of sense to me outside of just hating the other.
No, I think you're really onto something there. Because you're right, these guys don't have succinct arguments. They're not summarizing studies in ways and looking at comparative studies and looking what the overall trend is. They're sort of just talking in ways that are very emotive. And their aim is to say, look at how dumb these people are, don't take them seriously, or they're bad, inherently bad because of a group that I'm going to, they talk about identity politics. And then they use identity politics, against Muslims, for instance.
Well, it's not just that. I mean, they are using bad arguments, and I think that we can get into that as a separate meta discussion. But my whole thing is, if you actually look at the product that they're putting out, so I do some marketing and some advertising and so forth for my company, just as a product, it's not very good. It's not well put together. It's not well thought through. A lot of it is very, like I said, for Gavin McInnes, it's very attention deficit. It's very rambly. In addition to not being able to make a coherent argument about a thing, they don't seem to be fully able to put together a coherent sentence a lot of the time. And again, I'm not saying this about all of them. I'm saying this is the case for a large number of these people.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
It's silly to me. And I think that maybe it is just people have a tendency to hate people that are not like them. And that's heartbreaking.
It's definitely feeding on the worst parts of our instincts by throwing out, examples that are meant to produce outrage. I mean, it is an outrage machine that they're running here, is be outraged at the fact that, someone can't say, a group should be the victims of genocide. Somehow that is what they want people to be outraged about, and their rights and them personally, not the impact on the community. It's all about them. Protect our stuff, protect my rights. I have the right to say anything I want, even at the expense of, right? And that's othering, as you say. My feelings and what I want is more important than the public good.
Right, exactly. And that is absolutely the case. That is codified under law in America. My right to feel and say whatever the heck I want is law in America. Doesn't matter what you feel or think about what I say. And that people are going to get really mad at me for not supporting full free speech, but I don't care. Fuck it. I think that in order to have actual freedom in a country, you have to have some limits on those freedoms, because then the minority groups are no longer free. I have trans friends who they have to look up laws if they're going to travel across states to determine where they're allowed to go to the bathroom. That's not freedom, right?
No, you're absolutely right. Well, we're kind of conflating here freedom of speech and then bad, terrible policies based on bigotry. But in terms of people
Right.
creating hostile environments where they feel free to use slurs and violent language in order to intimidate people and silence them, that is a suppression of free expression and the other person's freedom of speech. But what they want to always do is frame it in terms of individual rights, not in terms of a collective impact of an individual's speech.
Right. And that's what I was saying, is that I'm referring to freedom in general, just any type of freedom that we're talking about. If your ability to express yourself or to create a situation in which another person is then no longer as free as they would be otherwise, that is detracting from overall freedom. And that's what I meant by the bathroom laws. That's an unacceptable inhibition of my best friend's right to go into a bathroom and pee. That's all she wants to do. That's genuinely all she would like to do. And if that is infringed upon, that is obviously removing a large piece of the freedoms of the subgroup. When we're talking about freedom of speech, however, am I correct in thinking that hate speech is illegal in many parts of Europe?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you mean by hate speech and what you mean by, illegal in terms of, for instance, the Count Dankula case where he was saying, about killing people because they're Jewish. That was, he was fined for that. He didn't go to jail. But in terms of regulating certain types of utterances, shall we say, like Holocaust denying and certain forms of hate speech, yeah, you could be criminally prosecuted. I know, for instance, that there was a case where, there was an attack, a homophobic attack, and I think it was London, and the person they were shouting homophobic slurs at them. And so it's sort of like in the States when you have a crime and a hate crime. The utterances there too are in the context of what happened, and so they give intention and are, so. But yes, so that's a really rambly answer, which I could have just said, yes, in many parts of Europe, there are forms of speech that are considered illegal because of harm to the public good.
Take me there. I would please keep rambling, because I want you, if you are able to or would like to give me a little bit more context about what exactly is considered hate speech and what can be prosecuted, because that's the thing I don't fully understand.
Yeah, I'm not an attorney either in German or UK law, and certainly not in French law or anything like that. But what I can maybe do is use the example of the Dankula case, which was prosecuted in Scotland. And you know the details of the case now? Okay, so basically everyone knows about, it's the pug video where he had him through symbols, and he used this very offensive phrase about killing Jewish people 23 times. So the way that the law worked in that case was, one thing, it was about social media communication. So one aspect of it was, did he publish it on a public forum? Did he make any attempts to make sure his message didn't get out of control, that it would become viral? Did he put it up in a way that it would get a lot of attention? Because here, it's not just what he said in the video, it's the fact that it was put up on social media and it got so much attention, or it was spread around, basically.
So if it hadn't been, it wouldn't have been prosecuted? That's what I'm trying to understand.
I think if he would have said it in the privacy of his own home or as a joke with his friends, then no, it wouldn't have been prosecuted.
Oh, okay. So the platform, and let's take this full circle, the platform that they're talking about, the platform that they think they deserve in order to maintain their free speech, is the entire thing which can cause them to be prosecuted.
Well, in this case, yeah. I mean, if you were to go and say that phrase in a rally, you could also be prosecuted for it.
But that's also a platform. That's what I'm saying. As long as you are saying this with the intent of providing that thought to a multitude of people and not making any putting any protections on it to prevent it from going further and getting screwy and getting out into the minds of the public, that's a platform, right? That's any platform.
Right. The other part of it was the fact that he did say, so in terms of, the privacy of the communication. So that it was demonstrated that he didn't try to make it private. So that was also part of the guilty part of his offense. But then there's a point that I was going to make. It was about hate speech, right? When you look at the guidelines for prosecution, which are publicly available on the internet as a PDF, in there, they before they kind of lay out what is grossly offensive, they talk about the right of free expression and freedom of speech. And they cite the European Human Rights Convention or law with the protections of speech. And then they also cite a British case in law where the judge was saying that, you, in terms of evaluating a previous communications bill that regulated this sort of thing, said, offensive speech, satire, parody, things that even make people feel uncomfortable. And also the phrase used or things used in the course of democratic debate. All of these things he listed as examples of things that would not be prosecutable, that grossly offensive was, in some ways, when something is really gross or offensive, or people find it to be an attack on them, and you can rule out the fact that it's not satire, it's not democratic debate, it's none of these things, you kind of left with grossly offensive. I mean, when you say a genocidal phrase, it's kind of hard to make the case that that's just satire, in the way that he did it with references to the Nazi imagery. So the actual law itself, the guidelines, really puts up quite a high barrier in order to protect freedom of expression and freedom of speech. They aren't looking for excuses to haul people in and prosecute them under, or go through their Twitter feeds looking for things to prosecute them under this law. That was my take reading both the guidelines and also the text of the what the sheriff, not the judge, read out in court. And in there, he pretty much goes through like the various guidelines and how the thresholds for all of them were met. Or in this case, the defenses offered by the defendant failed to meet the threshold of being credible. And because the weight of evidence was on the side of the guidelines of saying this is grossly offensive, it meets all the criteria we laid out, he's like, you're guilty. So it was a high bar to meet, and of course he has the opportunity to appeal, and he is making an appeal apparently. On what grounds, I don't know, but we'll see what happens with the case. So it's not so while speech can get you a fine, at least, it's not as if speech prosecutions are happening, you know, up and down Germany and France and the UK. It's sort of a case celeb when these things do go to trial.
Sub question. You said democratic debate is part of the exception.
Yeah.
Does that mean that, what's her name? Anne-Marie Waters? Anything she and her For Britain group say about Muslims can't be prosecuted if it's part of democratic debate, if it can be considered for an election or related to a candidate?
Well, in the terms of what they define as democratic debate in law in Britain, I don't know. But my impression of it was the way that they kind of I don't remember the wording precisely. But the context was more like, if you're discussing the use of these phrases in a society, that doesn't constitute using them against those people. That makes sense?
Oh, okay. I was hearing it the other way. Yeah.
Right. It's more like, how do you talk about, you know, the N-word in Mark Twain?
Sure.
You know,
yeah. Okay.
If you use it in an educational context because you're talking about the use of the word in the Times, that's not the same, you know, as yelling at somebody when you run up to attack them, for instance.
Regarding Mark Twain, I remember getting really, really angry in my English class in high school and going to the teacher and saying, look, this is not something I want to read aloud. I will absolutely read this book if this is a thing that you're making me read, and I will take tests on it, but I will not say that word out aloud anywhere. Even though there was not a single person of color in that class, I went to him completely, you know, confidentially. I said, look, this is how I feel about this thing. I come from a family of racists, well, on one side, and I won't say that word. And he was like, I respect that. You just have to read the book. So that was just a complete aside, completely unrelated. I see what I mean about tangents.
Yeah, it's good for, no, I'm impressed with your younger self.
My younger self, even very fiery, even religious, even coming from a small town in Kentucky, I was not willing to be that person. I was coming from a family where I had an uncle who would say the N-word over dinner at Thanksgiving when he was just yammering or when he was telling a joke or whatever. And I was always seated right next to him. And so growing up like that, I think I turned against it because I did not understand why you would hate an entire group of people that way.
Yeah, I was asked by Kevin on one of our hangouts about learning about Mark Twain and that word in school, and we never read it when I was in school. I heard bits of the various famous stories, but never the ones with that word. So I'm just curious to remember do you have any other recollections as to how it was taught? I mean, did the students actually read from it and use that word, or was there a discussion about the word in the class? Because like I said, that didn't happen. It wasn't on my curriculum.
Yeah. So the day that it was, and I'm trying to remember, the day it was said in class, like the teacher went up front and he was like, okay, the next book we're going to read is this. I'm just going to give you a quick heads up. It's got some language in it that you may find uncomfortable. We're not going to be reading any portion of it aloud in class like we would with some other books, unless there is a portion that you'd like to discuss during our discussion sections. Because there's actually, I think it was my AP English class when we were reading this. So it was relatively intelligent people. We were pretty far along in school, and no one expected that the other people who were, if they did read a portion of it aloud, were actually saying anything negative about a whole other group of people. But yeah, it was commented on, it was brought up, and I went to him thereafter and said, I'm never going to do that. I will make references to portions of the book, but if we're having a discussion, I'm not going to read those sections. And he said, that's perfectly fine. And then he looked at me kind of funny and said, something to the effect of, why are you getting so upset about this? Or why are you getting so up in arms about this? Like he didn't understand why it would be a problem for a young white girl in Kentucky to see those things. I don't remember that quite as vividly, but I do remember him having kind of a weird reaction to me saying I wouldn't do that. But yeah, the discussion of the book ended up being pretty good. We were on that topic for a relatively short period of time. It's not a super long book. It was discussed in class. I don't think anybody ever ended up reading that word aloud. It was more just discussed in context, and we moved on. It was kind of okay. It was kind of like when in my science class we were about to discuss evolution, and the teacher, this was my 9th grade, right? So I'm a freshman in high school science class. And he gets up there and he says, okay, we're about to talk about evolution. I have to teach this to you per the curriculum. I don't want to hear what you think about it. I just want you to learn the material and take the test. Like, he knew there would be people who threw a fit about it. He was like, I don't want to have any discussions about it. We don't want to break down the class about it. And there was still one girl who was like yammering every other day about how she would raise her hand and talk for a solid 10 minutes of the class about how it doesn't make any sense and Jesus created everything. So I went to a weird school. But yeah, we definitely, most of my teachers knew what was coming and would prep us for it. And that was one of those cases where it worked out well.
Right.
Not the science one, the English one.
English one, yes, yeah. By the way, Kevin Logan's in the chat, and he says he didn't know you were from Kentucky. He loves your chicken.
Oh, Kevin, it's not my chicken, it's everyone's chicken. But thank you. Thank you very much. I actually can make really good fried chicken.
Ah, you want to tell us your secret?
I'm not telling you my secret herbs and spices.
Roast.
Indeed.
Now, before we move on, because by the way, I didn't mention this at the beginning because of all the technical things that threw me off my game, but we're doing this hangout in 2 parts. We're doing about 45 minutes to an hour because I want to talk a little bit more about the Day for Freedom before we wrap this up. And then Bethany and I are going to hop over on her channel and we're going to finish up another probably 45 minutes or so. And do you want to, since I'm already talking about it, why don't you tell the people in the audience, and we'll remind them at the end, the release schedule on that and when they can expect it, and also that they'll find your link below my video once you give it to me.
Yes. So my show is She Talks Atheism. You'll be able to find that. Should be available on iTunes and podcatchers. Not on Stitcher as of yet. It'll be episode 5, and I will give you the link as soon as that's available. It will post on Friday morning, bright and early, I believe like 5 a.m. Central Time. If anybody gets really, really angry that they haven't gotten to hear the second half of this and sends you crazy messages, just let me know. And I shouldn't say this out loud on the broadcast, but I am willing, if necessary, to post early if people are really angry or anxious.
Oh, you give in so easily.
I do. I like listeners and I like to make them happy.
So getting back, so the links for that will be below and we'll remind you at the end, but getting back to the Day for Freedom, I think we've definitely established that the crowd size was on par with, let's say, an appearance by Cheap Trick at the county fair.
Thereabouts.
Joan Jett, Cheap Trick, something like that. So, I mean, not a jazz club crowd, but certainly not U2 in, a stadium or anything like that. And other takes that we have, besides the crowd size, this just seemed like basically a real self-indulgent cry bullying session of people with first world problems.
Yes, I think it was a combo platter of poorly managed and put together, crybabies who simply want to give themselves a new platform because their old platform was taken away. Aww.
Yeah, they're complaining about being banned from Twitter.
I know, right? Like, I don't care if you ban me from Twitter. That doesn't change my ability to like speak on my podcast or come and talk to you on your show or talk to people in real life. Like, that's my freedom of speech. Thanks.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of, you could do a whole lot of relative deprivation fallacy arguments as to things about free speech in the world that are far more important than whether or not Milo or Sargon got kicked off of Twitter.
Right, agreed. And frankly, I'm going to go back to that same point again. They're not very good at what they do. They're not good at being trolls or actually making coherent arguments or any of those things, but they're also not very good at explaining themselves when they do get in trouble and want their platforms back. And like you said, Carl Benjamin, Sargon of Akkad, has changed his story so many times about the things that caused him to lose said platform. And I think that comes down to either not knowing that just telling the truth about a thing is beneficial in a lot of cases, or it comes down to he just wants that platform back. Just give it to me. Just give it back. Right?
And the other thing, another hypocrisy on Carl's part, is that he's currently being sued in American court because he took a woman's 10-minute video, Akila obviously's 10-minute video, where she paid for a ticket to get into this thing and she traveled there and she did the work putting together the video. He edited it down to 2 minutes, basically in order. He didn't change the order of things. He just cut some things out and made it shorter, gave it a new title, and monetized it. That's...
I didn't know about that.
And he wants
to
say that that's fair use.
That is not fair use.
No.
That is dickish behavior. That's theft, and he should absolutely have to pay.
I did say that if Carl wins this case, then I'm going to download every single Disney movie, and I'm going to cut it down, because he did 2 minutes out of 10, right? So about 20%, the most important 20% of the story, and I'd give it a new title and put it up on my channel and monetize it, because it would be the exact same thing he did. And that's why he's going to lose the case. It's too broad an interpretation of fair use to say reducing down an original work and giving it a new title is transformative. It's just crazy.
It's different if you are reducing it down, utilizing small pieces or snippets from that original work and reviewing it. That's a whole different case, but it doesn't sound like that's what he did.
Oh no, he didn't add anything. He didn't do any voiceover. He didn't change anything. He didn't put in any new titles. He literally just cut down her original video, gave it a new title, put it up and monetized it.
Why on earth does he think he can get away with that?
Because he's, a privilege.
And wouldn't he have received, okay, this is the part of my brain that understands American law to some degree. Sorry, listeners, not to a complete degree, but I understand a little bit. If you do that, the original artist is going to come to you, or their lawyers are going to come to you, and they're going to provide you with a cease and desist, right? That's going to be thing one. You're going to say, hey, you did this thing. This thing was wrong. Please don't do that anymore and take it down. You're going to get a cease and desist first, so you know that what you did was unacceptable and wrong.
Oh, I didn't tell you. So he did put it up on YouTube, and she DCMA'd it.
Yeah.
And he filed an appeal to her strike, claiming he had fair use rights to use it. And then he also put it on Twitter as a video, and he put it on his Minds account. So he maliciously reposted it after it had been struck down for copyright, which is part of the case. There's a different grade of posting videos in that sort of way than just incidental, unintended, or not malicious reposting of it. So not malicious isn't the right word, but if you go watch the Leonard French videos on reading through the case file, he'll explain it better than I can. But as well, so let me just do this in fairness. I'm gonna steel man Carl's position, because it's some weak ass shit, right? This is his best argument. Within his community of fans, there's an understanding of a kind of irony. So when he cut the video down, he gave it the title, SJW Levels of Self-Awareness. something along those lines, right? So that title, he claims, is the transformative part of the work, because he's indicating to people that they should view this through the lens of SJWs are a bunch of idiot crybabies, let's laugh at them. And because he changed the title, that shows that it wasn't merely a theft straight up of her work.
You know what I'm going to say about that. I think you know. You want to know?
No, you go ahead.
It's just gross. It's just stupid and gross. It's like you knew what you were doing was wrong, and all you had to do, literally all he had to do, in addition to renaming it, was put one sort of, call it a 10-15 second page at the end that had a brief description of what he had to say about it, and then done. That's a review, and that doesn't count anymore as not fair use. If he's reviewing it, even if he just types up 2 sentences of this is how they think, like, it's just stupid and gross.
Yeah.
How can you, again, not good at what they do.
Yes, not smart, or a sense of entitlement, or an expectation of getting away with it. That nobody, because of course, you know, for her to actually hold him accountable, she would have to take him to court. And he just assumes most people are probably can't afford the costs of doing what she's doing, but she can't afford it. And he's having to raise money on a GoFundMe. And he got £10,000 from some guy who founded or is connected to Minecraft, some apparently really shitty guy. But yeah, so now he's like raising money off of it.
That grosses
and
monetizing
monetizing it. Yeah.
That also grosses me out for the simple fact that, like, okay, so this is something I've said on my other show. My partner is undergoing chemo right now and is not working. And I'm attempting to care for both of us and pay all of our bills and assist my partner with medical bills. And so I started a GoFundMe. Now, I haven't gotten no money on that. It's been very, very helpful. But at the same time, also shout out if anybody's listening who has donated. Thank you so much. Oh my God. But I'm not, for helping my partner pay off medical bills, I'm not getting $10,000 from some Minecraft guy, right? Like, what the hell kind of justice is that?
And this fan base, they funded the Sarkeesian Effect, which was a disaster of a con related to a documentary about Anita Sarkeesian. They funded a huge conference called Kilroy, which was a bunch of shitlords that blew up in their faces. They funded the Dankula legal account. They funded Mythicist Milwaukee, sent out a plea because they were in the hole after the conference where they had security because they had a bunch of shitty people coming. They were able to raise a bunch of money. So Jordan Peterson, I mean, this is a career path for some people. And the Day for Freedom is merely, it's kind of like when you go to the pyramid scheme companies, right? And they put on these shows where everyone's supposed to go and get really excited about the products that they're out there to sell, and you get your friends in it to sell it, and when they sell it, you make money off of when they make money, and everybody makes money, but most of the money just goes right up to the top.
Herbalife is really good at those.
Yeah. So that's the Day for Freedom, in my opinion. This is just the leaders who are conning all of the people in the pyramid scheme to keep the money flowing up to them.
I'm going to disagree, but only slightly. I agree on every single point, but with one addition, not even a caveat, that they also believe the crap that they're spewing.
Some
of them, maybe not all of them. Right. I think Anne-Marie Waters does.
Yeah, I think it's, for me, it's hard for me to plausibly get inside the mind of others. I tend to infer motive from action. And it's just hard to tell the difference between a true believer and a con man. I mean, you just look at Christianity, you just see that.
Right. The Poe's Law or whatever it is.
Oh, just Donald Trump. The way that people believe him, and he's obviously full of shit. And yet a lot of people just, so.
I'm having a lot of trouble, just as an aside, I'm having a lot of trouble with Donald Trump understanding if he is just really, really, really stupid, which a lot of people, all the people who have worked closely with him seem to be saying and being quoted as saying that he's just a moron, or if he is an actual bad actor. I'm having a lot of trouble deciding. I don't know.
Well, I would say, why don't we take that topic over to your show?
Let's show.
And on that cliffhanger, yeah, we're going to wrap it up here. Bethany, thank you so much for appearing. And again, the things that you mentioned, if you give me links to anything, your GoFundMe, whatever other accounts you want to promote, I will put those in the description box within the next 24 hours. And yeah, thank you so much for coming on. It's been as enjoyable as I hoped it would be. So thank you for that.
I've been absolutely delighted. Thank you so much for having me on.
Of course. And also to the chat people, I see some of my mods in there. Kevin, like I said, some random geek, G Whistler is in there, and everybody else. Sarah, I see you. Sabrina. Hello, you guys. Thank you for stopping by. Appreciate your time and attention. And yeah, do check back underneath here for the link for part 2, which we're going to go record right now. So until next time, guys, I have been Kristi. You have been awesome. Bethany has been awesome. Everybody watching has been awesome. And we'll see each other again really soon. Bye-bye. Oh, say goodbye, Bethany.
Bye, guys.
Yes, you both get to say goodbye. All right, now, officially, goodbye.